It's a story the U.S. Defense Department doesn't want you to see. Worldwide disdain greeted YouTube footage of Marines laughing as they urinated on 3 dead members of the Taliban back in 2012. But that is only part of the story. Some of those involved were demoted and others have since left the Marines. But new allegations have surfaced over the past year that show superior officers tried to be excessively harsh in their punishment, even more so than prosecutors thought was appropriate. The prosecutors also said it compromised the case and violated the proper chain of command. Sharyl Attkisson is an Emmy Award-winning investigative journalist. She's covered the story as a contributor to Blue Force Tracker and joins us from D.C. Sharyl, a terrific story here. First of all, explain how the actions of this General Amos compromised the case.
He's the head of the Marine Corps, and the allegations from the prosecutors are that he refused to turn over discovery in the case, discovery that the defense was entitled to, and improperly interfered with it from start to finish. The general says he got out of it once he realized some of his actions were inappropriate, but the allegations are he continued to intersect himself in the case in an inappropriate way, ordering the Marines to be allegedly crushed and prosecuted with felony courts-martial when the prosecuting authority had already determined that was not the appropriate course of action. That's called unlawful command influence, and it's a very serious violation if it occurred.
And how did the prosecutors essentially discover this? I gather that he sought to replace the original team of prosecutors and brought in another set?
The original prosecuting authority eventually testified that there had been an inappropriate conversation with the general in which the general ordered him to take certain actions and crush the Marines, which the prosecuting authority told the general he wasn't planning to do. The case was then pulled from him by the general and given to a second authority. Those prosecutors could not get the answer to the question of why the case had been transferred. They say that they were stonewalled when they tried to get appropriate discovery that the defense was entitled to, and that this compromised the cases very seriously.
And you spoke to one of the prosecutors who was brought in, and let's hear part of that clip. Watch.
The commandant had said he wanted these Marines crushed, and that if Lieutenant General Waldhauser wasn't willing to take these cases to a felony or general court-martial, that he would just remove him and replace him with another commander. It's hard to come up with another scenario that more clearly illustrates the problem of unlawful command influence.
Sharyl, how has all of this played in the Pentagon, and what's the feeling now about that General Amos, given all that's come out?
Well, the Commandant General Amos eventually spoke in a brief interview to NPR and acknowledged that he probably said some inappropriate things to that first prosecuting authority, but then he says the case was handled appropriately thereafter. That's in dispute from the prosecutors who took over the case, who say, again, that there was improper meddling on the part of the higher-ups and that they were stonewalled. What's happened, 9 cases have been disposed of. Bit by bit, you can see how each one on blueforcetracker.com was handled ultimately. But according to the prosecutor that you just heard from in that exclusive interview, 2 Marines who pled guilty to charges without the benefit of that discovery, he believes have been denied their due process and the justice that he says they fought for as U.S. Marines, and that's why he's speaking out now.
And there are other people, there are other cases that have essentially been ruined by the Commandant's zeal to aggressively punish those responsible. Does anybody know what was driving this? Was it political? Was he looking up and worried about the public image of the Marines? What was driving him to be so aggressive?
Well, another part of the unlawful command influence allegations concerns some speeches that the general gave to the potential jury pool, the officers and senior enlisted men, in which he was urging harsher punishments, more serious felony courts-martials. He was saying that the Marines weren't holding each other accountable the way they should be, and he acknowledged he was under extraordinary pressure from Congress in the wake of the urination case, allegations of rape cases that were going on, and it appeared as though he was under a great deal of political pressure and wanted that handled. It's not improper to say that, of course, he wants crimes prosecuted accordingly, but according to the prosecutors, he was commenting on evidence, he was taking part in making decisions which he's forbidden from doing involving the case, and that's where the improper activities allegedly occurred.
And those activities essentially taint or poison the case, and then the reaction from the Pentagon, from your reporting, it looks like a lot of folks there tried to cover up what he was doing.
According to the prosecuting authority, the prosecutor of the case, he had trouble from start to finish, really getting cooperation from the general staff at the Pentagon, at Marine Corps headquarters. In the end, the Pentagon has no comment, but we do have a link to the General Amos. Is the only comment he made that we found. He wouldn't comment for our report, but he did speak in a radio interview, and that's also on the website, where he did acknowledge some probably bad decisions, I think is how he put it, but said that in the end he thought everything turned out all right. As far as Major Wyrick, he's the whistleblower. It's very unusual for an officer in the Marine Corps to A, file a complaint against the head of the Marine Corps, as he did with the Inspector General, but also to speak out on camera, which he didn't do so lightly. So I think you'll find the interview very interesting. He's been stripped of his legal duties since September of last year, although selected for promotion at the same time to lieutenant colonel. But he says it's sort of like having a guy allowed to be a pilot, allowed to remain in the Navy, and yet tell him that he can't fly again. He feels that he's been retaliated against.
And then finally, Sharyl, for a lot of people not following the details, they may think, well, why should I care? I mean, these Marines were doing something awful. A commander wanted them to be punished further than the prosecutors thought was appropriate. Why does this really matter so much?
Well, first of all, I think people don't know whatever became of the case, and whether you think they committed a serious crime, you should be disappointed that the alleged interference from the general resulted in those cases not being properly prosecuted. If you felt that their crimes were not as serious as some people thought, you should be upset that the general allegedly ordered them crushed. So this tells the outcome of a case people really haven't heard much about. And the prosecutor, you'll hear in the interview on BlueForceTracker.com, explains, in America, of course, in this system of justice, it doesn't matter what you're accused of. You're entitled to a fair trial and due process. A politician can't come in, a general can't come in and say, this is how the case has to go. In America, that's unlawful.
Sharyl Attkisson, terrific reporting as always. Sharyl, thanks for coming on Al Jazeera America. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
You're welcome.